Right. Good morning from Dubai, guys, and welcome to the Career Talk, a portfolio of opportunities. About me, my name is Binod Shankar, and I'm the organizer and moderator of this event. A few words about myself. I'm a chartered accountant, got my CFA charter in 2006, probably. After a 17-year corporate career, where I rose to be executive director at a listed asset manager, I quit to co-found and lead Genesis and built it to one of Middle East's largest financial training companies. In 2017, I and my two co-founders successfully exited Genesis with a sale to Kaplan Inc. Over the last 15 years, I've probably taught about 4,000 plus CFA candidates across all three levels, mentored dozens of candidates and charter holders over the same period. My time these days is now spent as a frequent market analyst on CNBC and Bloomberg. I'm as a blogger and platform speaker. I'm also the host of the Real Finance Mentor podcast and YouTube channel, which focuses on insight and inspiration for finance careers. My co-moderator today, I'm not the only one. So my co-moderator today is Pooja Variani, who is not only handling the event admin, but also moderating the second speaker, Jay Pathak. Pooja graduated from the Georgia Institute of Technology in the US with a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration. She's worked as financial analyst with NCR Corporation in Atlanta, Georgia, and currently works as an associate with ASA Ventures in Dubai. Pooja is, of
Just
course,
a
right?
correction.
Yeah, sorry.
I
Pooja?
worked with ASA Ventures, but now I'm with a fintech startup.
Right. I took it from your LinkedIn profile.
So yeah, it's not updated, unfortunately.
Pooja is also a CFA candidate who's writing her level 2 exams in a few weeks. So I really appreciate her volunteering to help me out for this event. Thanks a lot, Pooja.
Anytime. Thank you.
About the Real Finance Mentor podcast, the reason why and how, right? So in my corporate entrepreneurship career, I noted many students and young finance professionals have similar problems. There's a lot of confusion about career goals and career tips, and a distinct lack of mentorship and guidance for ambitious youngsters, right? Career in accounting or finance or investing. So the Real Finance Mentor is about content that's authentic, practical, and relatable. By talking about my personal experiences and the narratives of others who have made it often after a struggle. The podcast is not just about issues, but also practical solutions and hope. I've done about 24 episodes of the podcast so far with full transcripts available. It's available on SoundCloud, Apple Podcast, Google, Stitcher, Spotify, etc. And recently, I also started the Real Finance Mentor YouTube series. These are short, like 10-minute discussions with youngsters, right? A lot of them CFA charter holders, where I ask them the 3 most important things that they know now about career that they wish they had known before joining the workplace. I've just finished the 9th YouTube interview, and you should check out the Real Finance Mentor YouTube channel and subscribe as well. Which brings me to today's event, right? The Career Talk. We have 3 stellar speakers, 2 veteran portfolio managers who are both CFA charter holders with global experience, and a top recruiter who has hired talent for some of the largest companies in the UAE. The event kicks off with Ganesh Suntharam, CFA, till approximately 11 a.m. Jay Pathak then takes over, and then we wrap up with the one and only Richard Lee, CFA. The event is from 10 a.m. to about 1:15 p.m. GST. The format is that each speaker will deliver a short presentation. Post that, I will ask my few questions. While all this is going on, I encourage you to post your questions in the chat box addressed to everyone. Try not to send private messages to me because we can then avoid duplication, right? The moderator will pick the more relevant audience questions and ask the speaker. We have allotted approximately 1 hour for each speaker. That should give enough time to answer many questions as possible. All participants have been muted, so please put your mic on mute if you don't mind. Please put your mic on mute, guys. And please keep yourself on mute during the duration of this webinar. Thank you. This is a rare chance to connect with and learn about a career in investment management from 3 industry experts. So I'll kick off with the first speaker who is with us. I'll introduce Ganesh Suntharam, who is Chief Investment Officer, Redpoint Investment Management. Now, Ganesh is a co-founder of Redpoint and is the firm's Chief Investment Officer. He is the lead portfolio manager for selected active quantitative equity portfolios. He is a member of the investment committee and a director of its board. Prior to Redpoint, Ganesh was the head of quantitative investments at Perpetual, where he was responsible for the quantitative equities business. He helped establish a quantitative equities capability, launching 2 long-short strategies and expanding the existing long-only business. Prior to Perpetual, Ganesh worked at Barra International. You probably heard that name. Is now part of MSCI, providing financial consulting services to many institutional fund managers, brokers, and asset consultants. Qualifications-wise, Ganesh comes with impressive credentials. He holds a Bachelor of Electrical Engineering and Bachelor of Computer Science from Sydney University. He's also a CFA charter holder and a past president of CFA Sydney Society. I invited Ganesh for this curated session because he was an engineer who switched to finance, got his charter, entered the field as an analyst, rose to become a fund manager in a highly specialized area, and then branched off and set up his own company. He co-founded Redpoint and became an entrepreneur as well. So he has a lot of interesting attributes and stories that I'm sure he would like to share with us. He's a very down-to-earth person, but please listen very carefully to what he has to say, and please do send me your questions on the chat box, which I can ask him after he's made the presentation. So with these few words, over to you, Ganesh.
Thank you, Binod. Hopefully you can hear me all okay. It's a real pleasure to actually be here with you all. It's been quite an unusual time for all of us, and just being able to connect with people on the other side of the world, literally, is actually quite refreshing. So I really thank you for the opportunity to join you today, and hopefully just share with you a little bit of my journey. So I think Vinod will put a presentation up. I'll just talk to this a little bit briefly, but I'll talk through some of those bullet points in more detail. But my journey into financial services started outside of finance itself, and as Vinod just mentioned, I started life as an engineer. Having finished 2 degrees, electrical engineering and computer science at Sydney. And in Sydney, you can do those as a back-to-back. So 5 years later, I was mostly done. Then from there, I ended up working for a company called Thomson, which is now Thales, and it's a listed company on the French stock exchange. You can see the ticker there on the presentation. So this job was very interesting for me. It actually basically involved drilling holes in ships, and part A was making sure that they didn't sink, and then part B was attaching a sonar system to them to make sure that the ship was safe. So very, very interesting and challenging job. I started that job as someone who was young and starry-eyed, and everything was new. It was also the first job where you finally had sort of money and independence, and I think many of you who've gone through university know that when you're at university, there's very little money and a lot of independence, but very little money. So it was that first job, and I want to talk to you a little bit about that first job because for me it was actually quite an important learning. What I learned was that Australians, like many other nations, do enjoy working hard, but they enjoy playing hard just as much. And so if I start with some of the lessons that I learned and in that first job, I think one of the ones that I'd probably say, especially for those of you that are very early on, just graduating, yes, it's important to think about your next career step, but don't get overly caught up in that. go and enjoy life, create new friendships, get life experiences, travel the world, and take that Steve Jobs trip to India, and really work on developing yourself, not just as for your career, but who you are as a person. I think that's actually important to say up front. The second part of that is that this should not be at the expense of your career. So when you are enjoying yourself, and it's very important to do that, think about also what you want to achieve in life and your career as well. So don't sort of go over the top and not focus on the career aspects as well. And that requires putting in hours too. So you need to balance that work life with your social life. And for me, I think one of the important parts along the way was my grandfather. He sort of sat me down. He could see that I was sort of enjoying life at post-university, and he said, look, using his age as leverage, he said, look, I want you to go and buy a house and sort of commit yourself to something. And that's what I did. So luckily, I bought that. 2 years later, he passed away, but it was one of the best sort of decisions that I made, or at least he made me make. So when you're in that first job, I'd say the first lesson is develop yourself, work hard, and play hard. The second part of that first job for me was about the different personalities that you meet in that first job. So for me, I had a mentor. She was the one who gave me that job. She was always looking after me. She had my back all the time, and I really respected her, and I have a good friendship with her to this day because of that opportunity that she gave. There were other personalities too. There was the very technical boss who was very organized. He got his hands dirty. He wasn't just a people manager. He was he was in the trenches with you, and that's something I admired about him, and something that I've worked to model myself on over time as well. And there were other types of people as well. For example, there were motivators, like real leaders who could really rally the troops and send them in a particular direction. There were fantastic specialists. There was a specialist who spent 3 months just drawing pictures on a whiteboard, looking to develop a massive aircraft detection system. And it got to the point where people were sort of wondering why he was drawing all these pictures. But then after that, the 2 weeks later, he'd completely written that. So that's a specialist skill that you just need to admire and really think about. So why am I telling you all this? Apart from playing hard and working hard, you're going to meet a lot of people in your career who you're going to take little bits from. So when you see something about a person and you admire that particular characteristic of someone, make sure that you absorb that and think about how you develop yourself personally to get those types of skills developed within yourself. So for me, that first job had a big impact, and I think it does for a lot of people, and they may not realize it, but it does allow you to model yourself on certain characteristics that you feel will be important for you going forward. And so in that lesson about developing yourself, what are those behaviors that you want to sort of create in yourself? What do you admire about people? How do you develop those characteristics are very important. And it's not to replicate them or be someone else. I think you need to be true to yourself and evolve in a way that suits you. So I just wanted to touch on that first job and really sort of flesh out, what learnings there are for those people who are just starting that journey, getting that first job, and thinking about, longer term where they want to be. So, that lesson is, develop yourself, enjoy yourself, have fun, commit to it, and then think about the characteristics of the people around you and the way you want to develop yourself. The next role that I had after that, the Thales role, was my first move to finance. This was with a company called Bara, who eventually got bought out by MSCI. When I started this role, I had very little domain knowledge. So I had great programming skills or engineering skills, but I had absolutely no knowledge of finance per se. And so step number one there was really to do the CFA. It's something that I needed to commit to as part of that job. So you needed to commit the hours outside of your normal role. As well as learning the job, you needed to learn the CFA curriculum. So there are, again, lots of hours involved, but it was a great way for me to understand a wide spectrum of content within the financial industry, and it was also recognized internationally by almost any organization in the world. So definitely recommend the CFA. There are plenty of good courses around, but for me in particular, and the point at which I came into the industry, I couldn't think of a better course to hang my hat on. The other aspects of working at Bara were cultural. So what you found in a defense type company or an engineering type companies, there is lots of structure. When you come to a finance company, the structure is less, but some of the things that are very interesting, particularly for Bara, which was based in San Francisco, it was a fintech startup. It was a very enjoyable place to work, very relaxed, casual place to work, was that meritocracy played a huge role in that particular organization. So there were so many different nationalities with so many different accents, and it was a real eye-opener for me coming from Sydney to see the wide spectrum of people that made up a finance organization. So within Sydney and at Bara, it was a great chance for me to not only make connections in the US, where Bara was based, but also a whole range of clients domestically, build relationships, and more importantly, to see my CFA knowledge in practice. So as you're helping institutional investors solve a particular problem or create a particular portfolio, you're actually taking that knowledge that you're learning in CFA and applying it to real life issues. So that was quite important in terms of that next stage in my career. And as I was getting to the end of my time at Bara, I ended up taking a risk. I took a risk which effectively changed my life for good, really. And that was to make a phone call to a person at Perpetual. Now, he was a very senior person, and when I was at Bara, we had a close working relationship with Perpetual because they were one of our key clients, and we were actually building quantitative portfolios for them, which they were then distributing locally. And what happened was that Perpetual had a new CEO at the time. They were looking to internalize this capability. And so I decided to take that risk and give him a call. So we set up a coffee, put myself forward for a role of portfolio manager there, and said that I can help them grow that business successfully. And that they organized a second coffee with me, this time with the CIO of that business. And in that meeting, we essentially took a piece of paper and wrote down all the things that I needed to achieve and what needs to happen for them to succeed. And off the back of that single piece of paper, we essentially they basically created a contract and sent it to me. So my lesson towards the end of my Bara days, and the lesson to share with you, is that when you're ready and when you believe in yourself and you think you are capable of delivering to an outcome, then take that risk, take a chance in yourself, and give it a go. You don't get too many you can't make too many of those phone calls. They're quite rare in your corporate life, but when you are ready, make that call and make it happen for yourself. So that was my second learning from my days at Bara, which I feel would be relevant to you guys. So then I moved across to Perpetual, and this was a huge opportunity for me. It came with enormous highs because of the success of that business, and GFC size lows because we were in the middle of the GFC while I was at that business. But the opportunity was for me to move from a research person in the back engine room, which is probably where most people saw me, to a client-facing portfolio manager. I was really there to help them grow that business, build their relationships or help them build relationships. And I was also responsible for the performance of our strategies and the research process that fed into the strategies that I managed. So it was a big task and one that I really relished. To be honest, I put in a lot of hours into that role to make it successful. After giving them a phone call like that, I could not commit to it. I couldn't commit to it half-heartedly. I had to give it everything. And the other aspect of that was that I had a great team around me as well. We had I had great team members, had great business leaders to support me, and with that type of framework in place, we built a very successful long-short business that was complementary to the traditional long-only business that Perpetual had. So that was the key objective of Perpetual when they decided to bring me on board. So one of the lessons that I think I can probably share with you from that experience is that you need to, for me at least, it was really important to push myself. I had to push the boundaries of what I was capable of, and it's only through doing that that you actually develop and grow in your career. So what I can suggest to you is that in a similar way, push the boundaries of what you're capable of. Say yes to things whenever you can, and also take on a role that you need to grow into. Don't wait for the role that exactly matches your skill set today. Think about what a role that you desire is, and your ability to grow into that role. So again, don't constrain yourself by your current skill set. Push yourself and the boundaries that are around you. And that sort of brought me to Perpetual. This was an opportunity. That was so the landscape in Australia in 2011 was changing quite substantially. There was a lot of government regulation coming through, which really pushed the market towards simpler, more enhanced index type solutions. And the investor needs were changing quite substantially as well. So this was an opportunity to create a business that would fit well into the evolving landscape that 2011 offered. But but in creating any business, it is also a very challenging proposition. In a large organization, you don't always have to think about where operational funding is coming from. You don't have to think about how to successfully grow the top line of the entire business. So it it's not, but in a smaller business like a startup, you then need to start thinking about not just the investment side, but how you survive as a business, how you thrive as a business. And those business things, as well as the investment side of things, become crucially important in your career. And so if there was a key lesson that I've learned from my time at Redpoint, the lesson would be that you need to dig deeper. When you think you have no more to give as a person, you need to find something in yourself and give more. Because as sort of a leader in your organization, there's no one really there for you to go to. There's no boss per se. So it's a hard thing to get your head around as your career evolves, that there becomes more and more pressure on you as a person, and that takes time to comprehend. But what you realize is that people are looking up to you in the same way that you used to look up to them before, and you used to admire certain characteristics of them before. There are people now that are looking up to you to give them the same sort of inspiration. And so in digging deeper, you really need to be the one who delivers the outcomes. You need to be the one that shows the way in terms of the vision of your business, what you want to achieve in the future. So that's four lessons, I guess, from the 4 jobs that I've had in my career, and each one sort of you get more and more skills as you go along in terms of how you actually grow as a person and achieve the things that you achieve. I think there's probably one thing that my journey and my experiences highlight. It's that finance is a very broad and multidisciplinary field. There's no one single textbook that can cover the complete breadth of knowledge that you need to understand finance. And as an example, I've met medical doctors who've been great analysts. They've been great healthcare analysts within an organization. I've met journalists who became one of Australia's #1 stock pickers and he was at Perpetual at the time. And he had a great way of using his journalistic knowledge to really interrogate companies and really get insight into those organizations. I've also met chemists who've gone on to become great quantitative portfolio managers in their own right, just because of their ability to understand the implications of investment choices on client portfolios. And I've even met mechanics in the Australian market who started off in that trade and then subsequently went back to university, did all the training, and went on to become great traders in their own right as well. So I hope that gives you a bit of hope in terms of wherever you are, whatever career choices you've made to date, that there is a pathway for you. It does come with hard work. It does come with a little bit of luck as well, but the hard work always gives you the ability to position yourself for capturing some of that luck when it comes along. So With that, I'd probably stop there in terms of my journey. I'll quickly touch on the quant industry just for a quick overview, and then I'll hand over to Binod for some questions. In terms of the quant industry in the Australian market, it's always been there, but the types of products that people run have changed materially. There was a point in time when it probably made up 10 to 12% of the Australian market. It's probably back to about 5% today. But then if you start thinking about the structured beta products and some of the non-cap weighted index products like the real index, the RAFI type approaches, the fundamental indexation type approaches to the world, it's just come back in a different form post GFC. So there is always demand for that type of industry. The essential skills, I think, mathematical knowledge is important. Programming knowledge is important. For example, in our organization, we do a lot of programming. We use tools like MATLAB. That forms the heart of a lot of our research work. We use tools like Python, which forms the infrastructure backbone. All the data transformation and loading happens in that environment. We have a lot of Java, which we require for the portfolio construction aspects of the things that we do. And then we also have a lot of more traditional databases, SQL, etc., that back into that. So understanding those types of things for the quant industry is very important. But in addition to that, you also need an awareness of what the implications are of investment decisions, what the implications of investment decisions are for your end client. It's great to have technical skill, but you need to understand the implications of that technical skill on client portfolios. So from that point of view, I would probably say that the CFA is a strong candidate for that, and I'm glad that the CFA Society of UAE is running these types of courses to help you in that journey as you progress through the CFA. So I was going to just stop there and probably hand back to Binod for the Q&A side of things.
Thanks, Ganesh, for that overview. Quite interesting, and I'm sure you only touched the tip of the iceberg, so to speak, given the duration that we have. I particularly liked your point about hard work giving you the ability to position yourself, take advantage of luck. And as someone said, I think luck is what happens when hard work meets opportunity, right? We've got a few questions from the audience, Ganesh, and I'll try and go through them, as many as possible, the relevant ones. So Deep Mazumdar asks, may I request for a timeline of time spent in the respective companies prior to founding Redpoint? How long did you spend at the fintech firm that allowed Perpetual to gauge that you were suitable to hire as a PM or trainee PM?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've been in most of my roles for about 7 years, roughly each, so the first one was I actually started there before I finished my degree, so I had a scholarship and experience there. Bara was about the same. It was about 6 years at Bara, and then about almost 9 years at Perpetual, and it's been another 9 years at Redpoint. So I do think that it's important for people to find a good place and a good home. Like you don't want, it's better if you can take the time to find a good home or job, as it were, rather than maybe trying different things too often.
Right. And Ganesh has a few questions for you. He says, thanks for your time and valuable insights. 2 questions specific to experience. He says, number one, given the shift towards passive investing, you see that all around us, right? I mean, what's your view on the future of active fundamental-driven fund management? And how does a conventional buy-side analyst guide his career to accommodate this shift? This is a very important question. I think I was about to ask you the same. That is question number one, Ganesh. And second question, for people from business administration background, how do they bridge the skills gaps for quant investing, specifically maths and CS? I think CS means coding probably, or statistics and or computer science. Sorry, yeah. Mm-hmm. So two questions. Yeah.
Yeah. So probably starting with that first one, Binod, there has been a massive shift to the world of passive investing. I think one way to probably think about that is if the whole world went passive. Let's say that we got rid of all the active managers, everyone was a passive manager, and what would that world look like? And I would say that the amount of investment opportunities and the amount of alpha that would be available to potential participants would be huge. And even when you go completely passive all around the world, you've still got different objectives. People are at different points in their career. They're going to have different needs for income or growth, and so there's always going to be shifts of assets moving around, and you can sort of see that today in that even hedge funds are more and more taking advantage of ETF flows, and they're doing a very good job of it because of that large shift to passive or ETF style investing. So I would say that it's a little bit of a yin and yang type thing. Maybe we can argue that the pendulum was too far on the active side over a long period of time. You can probably say that we all know that it can't be 100% passive. So I think there is some middle ground there, and the importance of active management. You need active management, whether it's quantitative or whether it's traditional fundamental. The ability to analyze a company and think through the implications or structure or thematics to bias a portfolio, I think are long lasting and beyond just where the market is today.
Right. Going a bit into that question, the first question itself, Ganesh, my question would be, suppose you have a conventional buy-side analyst. Does a conventional buy-side analyst have any role in passive investing? What does he do there if he has to work in that field?
Yeah. So in most of those organizations where you have an analyst within an index portfolio, most of that comes back to the responsible investment policy. There are a number of risks that investors still want you to address as an owner of those assets. For example, ESG type risks are important. There's always proxy voting and other elements that become important, but your traditional valuation of a company is no longer material in that type of environment. So the main things that are on offer is that understanding of regulatory risk, corporate risk, and proxy voting.
And Ganesh, second question for you was, for people from business administration background, how do they bridge the skills for quant investing?
Yeah, an MBA. I mean, an MBA is a great qualification in its own right. So, in terms of the application of that to and actually, my old boss, just to finish that off, he did have an MBA. So, and he was such a wise thinker. That I really enjoy talking to him even to this day. Now, but what it does ultimately, the qualification on its own is not the main thing. The main thing is once you're at an MBA, you're probably just looking for experience and the right role to make it work. For me, I was sort of luckier in that I did my CFA and also got to apply the content of my CFA in the job that I was in, which then really helped boost my understanding and opportunities for me. So in terms of bridging the gap, I would say that if you've got an MBA, I mean, you're going to be quite a well-credentialed person. It's then about networking and finding the opportunity more so.
Right. Someone's asked a question that I was about to ask you, and this is about your engineering history. So he says, what are the transferable skills you were able to take from your engineering role to investment management and portfolio management? And that's a very fascinating question.
Yeah. So when I was in engineering, we did a lot of work on things like AI, for example. We did a lot of work programming. I did a lot of work in MATLAB, like designing algorithms. All of those types of skills were directly transferable. I could have gone almost to a number of different industries based on my ability to program and my ability to develop algorithms. So that was the main transferable skill that I used to move from engineering into finance. But what I did lack, as I mentioned earlier, was that I didn't have the domain knowledge of that industry, and that's where you need to catch up.
Right. I mean, Vrinda has a question, and I think she's a fresher. She asks, usually a fresher does not get a chance to work in the capital markets, and usually a fresher pursuing CFA would get a job or placement in accounting department as a trainee or intern. Does it actually help the fresher to get into the capital market with the accounting experience? I think the question is, they work in audit or accounting. How do they shift to capital markets or asset management?
Yeah, I haven't worked in those types of organizations before. So, I mean, the skill itself of working in an accounting firm, understanding, your accounting, how a company presents their financials, all of those types of things are important. I would say that one of the and also I've met plenty of accountants who've ended up becoming fund managers as well, and good analysts too while they're at it. I think it's the industry expertise that would helps a lot of them make that transition. So when you're looking at a portfolio of equity assets, for example, which is what I'm used to, and then you're thinking about how do I analyze this particular sector, whether it's the gambling sector or whether it's engineering, construction, or healthcare, or whatever it might be. I think developing your skills with a deep understanding of a sector is actually maybe quite helpful. Right. But you need to complement that with some networking. So go to the CFA events. Talk to healthcare analysts. Try if that's the sector that you're looking at, and try to make those connections at the same time.
Right. Now, Ganesh, you're a senior, highly experienced CFA charter holder, right? Who works in the sector that many people dream and hope to be in. And I believe youngsters will greatly benefit from a chat with you, right? On career matters. Now, I'm also sure many approach you on career matters for guidance and mentorship. What's that one thing or couple of things that makes you want to mentor someone or advise someone? And what's that one thing that really, for lack of a better word, pisses you off?
Well, that second one is I think the one thing that annoys me, I guess, is that I just can't help people as much as I would like. Sometimes you meet people and you see them, you talk to them, you know that they're smart, you know that they're humble, you know that they're sensible, you know that they're driven, and you think, I know that if I gave this person an opportunity, and they would actually embrace that and really deliver on that. But in a small organization like I'm in at this point in time, that's actually quite tricky. What has worked in the past is when I've been at larger organizations, I've actually said to them, um, I'm going to present at this you want me to present at this university? I'm going to present. I'll happily present to sort of give people career advice. But if I go there, then I want you to offer at least one or two places to the students there. And that was quite effective. We actually placed a guy when I was at Perpetual who went on to become a bond analyst, and then he actually went on to become a bond portfolio manager. And every time I bump into to him in the streets of Sydney, he's forever grateful to me, even though it was a very small thing on my part. So I think that's probably the one thing that I find hard. But there are some good programs too. Like I'm sure CFA UAE is probably the same, but we are running a number of mentoring programs in Australia, trying to get older professionals to give back to the younger ones. That's been really successful. We've got the F3 program, which allows younger girls to get exposure to industry or get industry experience. And we've also had this Open Doors event to try to, again, create a female professionals network to allow them to meet that older cohort of people and find mentors and sponsors.
Right. And the first question would be, what really attracts you towards someone that makes you want to mentor him or her?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. It is a lot of time and commitment on your part. So you can't do that as often again as you would like. I think what I've learned from the CFA is that it comes back to someone that I think you would naturally feel that you can help them. So you have some expertise. There's an overlap of expertise, which means that you can actually help them in some way to evolve their career. And I think it's not so much about being smart per se, but I think there's a lot to common sense and being a sensible, level-headed type person. That's really helpful because it helps you in your career. And it also helps when you're mentoring someone that you know that they are quite thoughtful in the way they go about doing things.
Right. I've got a question that came via email, Ganesh, from a level 1 candidate in Muscat, Oman. And she asked, what are the challenges that you deal with consistently while being a chief investment officer? And how do you counter them? How do you analyze the problem? How do you break it down? Basically, how do you deal with your life as a CIO and people manager?
Yeah, so I think it's mainly the communication aspect that is the most important part that you need to worry about there. So with every issue that you come across as a CIO, every one of them is different. Like when you think you've seen it all, then you see something else. And I think COVID was another example of that. You thought after 30 years you've seen everything, and you see something else completely different. There's always issues. So for the most part, when it comes to sort of problems and how you actually solve them as a CIO and how you analyze them, I think one of them is you need that technical knowledge in order to solve that problem. You need to be prepared to get into the trenches with your troops. I think that's really important too. And it's sort of one of those learnings that I had from an old boss a long time ago. And why it's important is because you can then communicate with people at at their level. So they know that you know your stuff. They already know their stuff. So you're able to communicate at their level. There's immediate respect there. And that's quite important. It actually is quite helpful. And then the other part of that is when you're working through the problems with them, solve it together. Like, don't try to enforce your point of view on them. You need to get the buy-in from them for that problem solving as well. So it's much better to say, okay, we've both thought through this. What do you think? What do you think? And then you come up with a solution that both of you embrace. I think that's quite important, rather than having a more traditional boss employee type relationship. I think that's sort of gone by over time.
Right. I've got a question from Mohammed Nihal. He says, as a CFA charter holder and a programmer, what would your advice be to a budding coder that would help the person to align themselves with that of the finance industry and the capital markets? This is the other way around. Earlier, we talked about journalists trying to get into maths and stats and programming. Now, assuming you have a coder who wants to get into investing.
Yeah.
Do the CFA, you think?
Yeah, I mean, that was what was helpful for me. So that is it Mohammed? I think was
Mohammed Nihal.
Yeah. So I think for him, his background sounds more similar to my background, and number one is try and find a job that is in the finance industry and can take you and he can make use of that investment type skill set. For me, that was one that had was with a service provider into finance, which was Barra at the time, but they had very deep analytical tools for institutional fund managers. So that was number one. I was using products that the institutional funds managers were using. And then number two was the CFA, because it's one thing to have that great technical knowledge, but without the domain knowledge or understanding the implications of technical knowledge on the client outcome, it can only go so far.
Right. I've got one question. Probably this is our last question, unless someone asks other question in the chat box. Now, you turned entrepreneur after almost 17 years in corporate life, coincidentally the same number of years as I did before I switched from corporate to entrepreneurship, right? And you co-founded Redpoint. Now, I'm very curious, what gave you the confidence that enough people would trust you with their money, Ganesh?
Yeah, that's a good one. So in terms of that, I think there was a number of things that came into play for me when we started our business. It wasn't just a trust in me per se. I think there was a number of things that worked in our favor, which sort of got me into that particular role. And the first one was probably we had an ambitious plan. As you know, we sort of had 2011. The landscape had changed. The goal was to create a broad equities capability, and rather than a single product-led strategy. And that was quite an ambitious plan. So that comes with its pros and cons, but I liked that ambition. The team was good. We had a very strong and senior group of people who were well recognised in the Australian market. Then we had the capital. So it's one thing to want to start a business, but it's another thing to put the compliance systems in place, put the trading systems in place, put the policies in place, so that an institutional investor can come to you and say, hey, I want to give you some money. So we couldn't have done that without one of the big banks in Australia supporting us from an operating capital point of view. We had the investment capital as well, or some investment capital secured as part of that transaction. I mentioned the legislation changes, which were sort of a tailwind to our organization. And then the timing was right as well. So all of those factors came into play there, Binod, and then that sort of gives you the confidence to take that step. I think if someone came to me and said, "Hey, let's start a business," I would probably think twice. So a number of things fell into place, and it sort of worked out well.
Well, it worked out very well, and I'm envious and respectful of what you've achieved, Ganesh. Great career, from all the way from engineering to CFA to analyst to fund manager, and then now CIO and co-founder of a respected finance asset manager in Australia. So very well done. And I like the lessons. To summarize for the listeners, the key lessons that Ganesh talked about today on the career journey was develop yourself, take risks, push your boundaries, and dig deeper. Is there anything else you wish to add, Ganesh, before we wrap up?
No, just thank you and your listeners' time, Binod. I appreciate you guys all taking your time to listen to me. And yeah, I've appreciated my time with you. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Ganesh, connecting all the way from Sydney in Australia, for making the time to prepare for and deliver this session to the many youngsters who are very keen to hear your message. Thank you so much on behalf of Real Finance Mentor and the audience, and we'll keep in touch.
Yeah, thank you, Binod. Thank you, Pooja. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. I really hope you found it insightful and inspirational. If you did enjoy this episode, please drop us a review and spread the word. And be sure to check out more exclusive content on therealfinancementor.com and my LinkedIn profile, which is Binod Shankar CFA. Let's keep in touch. Just add your name to the mailing list on therealfinancementor.com and we'll tell you about new episodes, plus book reviews, upcoming events and blogs. Till the next time, onwards and upwards.